Hey everyone, this is Tom, and this week's winner of the character art lottery was Dylan, and his character is Davor Chainfist, a yellow orc. And we'll just go into it as we go. Davor is a good character. It was really nice to be able to draw something more creaturely rather than, a lot of humans and elves. It's sort of what I'm expecting, but it's a nice break. Definitely looking forward to dwarves and other sort of characters like that, but giants and stuff. I'll get into that I'm sure later on. But it was really nice to work on an orc character, especially he's a yellow orc, something Dylan came up with, sort of a twist on a typical orc, but still structurally very similar. As far as the pose and everything goes, the anatomy I was thinking of. Usually when doing orc stuff, I often just lock on to things like gorilla anatomy. And usually the number one thing I take from gorilla structure is just the flared out rib cage that I like, and I think that's a really good look for orcs. There's some stuff that's just kind of got to be there, just like barrel chests and sort of stocky legs and long arms and stuff, and I'm totally okay with that. I'm super on board with that stuff, but there's a lot of variety still available, but I like keeping things in this sort of realm, but it's fun. I've never been able to quite capture the level of exaggeration of like a Warhammer dwarf or like a Paul Bonner approach to orcs and trolls and things like that. It's just, but I'd love to be able to exaggerate stuff like that. But anyway, so Davor is a massive guy. He's in peak physical condition. He's definitely like middle-aged, getting up there, especially for an orc who's had a rough life. Let's go into some of his history stuff, but as we go, I can get into that stuff. The final product, I think he looks a little bit older than he is. He's only 43. But I'd figure that orcs would probably reach maturity sooner than other races. This is just me trying to fill in like details as I go, stuff that sort of makes sense for what they are. Like something that's so like a race that's so brutalistic and warlike. I'd imagine there'd be evolutionary pressure for them to be something that can be able to fight earlier on. He just seems like a good idea. So I thought pushing him in his age, like visibly, maybe towards the more like mid 50s, like kind of like a decade further on or so, would probably suit him a bit better. Plus, on top of the fact that he grew up being a pit fighting slave and is now in the military for the sake of traveling, being out in the sun all the time. I'd imagine that would probably have aged him quite a bit. So yeah, that's kind of why he looks a bit older. Still very muscular and broad though. With Davor's body, I've drawn the bones a bit thicker, especially like in the arms and stuff. That's just kind of helps set up the frame a bit better for a muscular body. And plus, when muscle builds, the bone does get a bit thicker and sturdier along with it, just to help support it. So it's just nice to think of that when I'm going in and lumping stuff in. I mean, I already know how he's going to be quite muscular, but it's just nice to have that kind of solid frame sitting there waiting. So yeah, just big, strong, sturdy orc. I mean, with orcs, there's a lot of variability. They are purely mythical and made up, and you can really do what you want. But in this case, I think Dylan and I have similar tastes, and that just something mostly humanoid, but with a little bit more of like an extreme kind of slightly exaggerated sort of form is pretty good. So Davor, he does have a nose that's been broken several times over his life, being a pit fighter. He's got one of his ears has the tip missing. That sort of explains his His sort of busted up, mangled head. Not too many visible scars on him though in the end, but there's just some. You don't want to have too many scars over him. Otherwise, he could look a little bit sloppy. I wanted Davor to be a little bit more classy, a little bit more skilled. He doesn't get cut. He's not some scrub. Yeah, filling in body type. He's definitely approaching something more like a bodybuilder, like really filled out, kind of thorough body. I think in Davor's case, he comes with his own built-in excuse of the fact that if he was an expensive prize fighter, they're like a slave that was sent to fight, sort of like dog fighting. There is training and stuff involved, and he would have this sort of frame built up over the years of needing to work out and train and be strong. And then plus he's in the army, so he's got regimented lifestyle and everything. So he is, out of the characters that I've drawn so far, the most primed to be living a lifestyle, is most similar to a professional athlete or a bodybuilder. So he does have like the more fleshed out, like jacked up body. Plus it is part of his character that he is in peak physical condition. That hasn't been specified in any of the other characters yet so far, but it's fun as long as I mean I do poo on just bland bodybuilder physiques in fantasy art just thrown in, but when that's only because it just very rarely like serves the character. But in Davor's case, I think he's a perfect candidate. Does it make sense for him? I felt that Davor was just a kind of like a nice change of pace. I feel that I sort of got through him quite a bit faster. I think the runtime for his drawing was just 6 hours. I think it's just I love drawing monsters and creatures and orcs and trolls and goblins and stuff. So I just got like right to the meat and potatoes. I'm really happy with how he turned out. But I should also mention that Dylan wasn't a winner of the lottery. He was just the first person to ever tweet me at my Twitter at R&D Fantasy, and I thought that that kind of deserved a thank you, even though Wandering Hunter won that one, but it was really fun to do, and it was a nice thing to work on over Christmas break, and I was able to get it done right before I left town. Just went out of the city for a few days, and it was good to get it done for him. Yeah, nice little break of a character. The creaturey stuff is the most fun. But don't be pressured to don't think you should. Just if you win, just send me your character. It doesn't matter. Don't feel pressured to try to send me a particular thing. I'll draw it all happily. For the anatomical, I put in most of the main muscles under the skin, but when I started the line art, that's usually when I include sometimes an indication of the thickness of the skin and then fat content underneath. I mean, so far everybody that I've drawn has been pretty lean, so there hasn't been much for like major fat deposits or anything. But in this case, I was thinking like the perfect sort of inspiration for like fat content and age and fitness level would be Mickey Rourke. So if I found like a good picture, Mickey Rourke does a lot of like boxing and fitness stuff, so it wasn't too hard to find a picture of him with his shirt off. Also with the wrestler, but with the wrestler he was still a bit too like puffed up and wrestlery. Finding one of him just on a regular day, well, not on a regular day, he's not just one, whatever. But yeah, I found a really good picture of him, and it was like just mostly for like the chest and the abs and like where the shoulders connect. Things like that. It's like, where the wrinkly skin sort of shows up, where the fat just won't go away, how defined certain things are, how much muscle like upkeep do you need. So things get subtle, things get differently shaped as you age, and I thought that'd be a really good source of reference. So it was just nice to use that to sort of remind myself of like what details to include and what not to. You'll notice like his pecs do have a little bit of a droop at the very bottom. That's sort of more like the looser skin hanging down and all that sort of stuff. A lot of artists forget that the body is as much a part of the character as the face is, and the more you can learn about like everything in the universe, the better. But the ways that bodies age and how they develop and how they grow and what can go wrong and what can go right and all that stuff with the body is something that's really important, like how wounds heal or how posture can affect the spine and stuff like that. And even if you don't like know it all offhand, then being able to just be open to going and looking and trying to learn once you need it, it can just be can really help. Just like I often mention that how like posture and pose can do a lot to communicating a personality of a character, but the facial features, the costume, but also the body type and the artifacts on the body itself play a role. Even if you can't pin it down, I like to think that people kind of pick up on it subconsciously. Like even if somebody was zoomed in on the finished picture of Davor, that if they couldn't see his face but they could see his chest, they would be able to tell that he was older. That kind of thing. I think that sort of detail is important. So for me, the biggest challenge with Davor was definitely figuring out how to dress him. He's an ex-slave that was bought out by a wizard and somewhat trained. Davor definitely preferred material techniques. He liked the practicality of just what he himself could physically do. He does use a little bit of magic here and there. I'll go into later. But sort of now he's in the military, and he's actively in the military. He's not retired. So trying to come up with something that, in the military, you've got an outfit given to you. It is sort of slightly mercenary-ish, a little bit more casual than like a full-on formal military. But so I'd imagine there'd be some room for a reason that they'd be okay with him using chains for weapons, which he does, rather than a standard sword or cutlass or something that they'd be given, or a spear, some sort of how he's not wearing a shirt, he doesn't wear sleeves. I'm sure that's not really up to code. If there even is a code, it'd be a flexible one. So having no sleeves, I figured why not just carry that into wearing no shirt. There's something to, put in at least a little bit of personality. As far as the outfit that he actually has, I wasn't given much for the description. He just wears he typically, all I was told is that he typically wears light sleeveless leather armor dyed dark gray. That's it. Also, he has chains, one that he uses for punching, one for whipping, essentially. And he has a little toy that his sister made, that he cared for deeply as a boy, which is related to how he got into slavery. But she made it for him, and he uses it even to this day and in combat. And other than that, the outfit was totally up to me to try to figure out. So the place that he works for is called Bellshine. It's it's a place. It's a culture that was initially founded by dwarves, but they've been sort of they now have a lot of an orc and human element to that town or city or place. Um, so there's room for some sort of more casual look to the armor, less like if it was still like fully dwarven and he was in the dwarven military, like his outfit would be much more sort of angular and typical dwarven looking. But with the orcish influence, that's kind of why I went for the more like Mongolian jacket, which is where that was inspired from. It's got these like leather strips, these sort of scales, leather strip scales going back and forth, and also like the big sheepskin collar. Just having that as like an orcish thing. The belt itself kind of comes down at a pointed angle, and the logo of like the belt buckle is the logo of in the shape of a bell. At least some kind of clear symbol of either his rank or the fact that he's part of that army. I wanted that to be the dwarvenly element. I mean, same with some of the points and angles of the pants. The pants are based on an 18th century French horse rider officer's uniform. It had like leather sort of attached like parts going up the inside of the thighs and the outside of the thighs and stuff. And as far as like these shoes that he's wearing, I recently watched a documentary about Rome a few months back, and they were waxing poetic about how nice this, or like how far they could walk. And Davor, he joined the military hoping that in his travels with the military, he would come back, or he would be able to find information about where his family had gone to while he was in slavery. And so thinking about him being in the military for traveling, that kind of reminded me of learning about how fast and far the Roman military would go. So I thought that'd be good to maybe give him some footwear based on Roman military sandals. I don't remember what they're called. It's like Caligari or something like that, but a lot of leather straps with like metal stud work going down into the foot for grips and stuff. But also just gave him wool socks. Wool socks would just be good for keeping your feet dry and comfy. And it's for the most part, that's kind of what his outfit is going about. So once again, doing the white frame, as I've learned from previous attempts, that I should just wait until I've got the outfit lined up. I don't need to do it around the body and then do the costume. Just wait till I got the costume all sorted out. This just allows me to not worry about keeping the border or the silhouette of the figure clean. I can just paint however I like and just not worry about it, and it's all taken care of. I can just put that layer on top of every other layer and just work in any way that I want. Unless I'm trying out something like this where I'm changing the silhouette and then I'd have to go and readjust the frame to suit it. But thankfully I dropped that high collar idea. He is a sergeant, so he does have some rank, some level of control. I wanted him to, he's already quite imposing, but I did want him to look somewhat more imposing if possible by his outfit. So a black vest. I thought the vest I thought the idea of having something like a Russian military like sleeveless vest would be cool, but having like a high collar would maybe help make him look a little bit more ranked, if that makes sense. Something that goes up the neck, make him seem a little bit more like kind of no nonsense, like in charge. Could all just be my imagination, but I thought it suited him. Once again, I often like to start rendering out the face, at least enough to get a good sense of like the structure and volume of it. It's nice to kind of get a face done early, or at least enough of the face done that you can recognize it, so that as you're working on the rest of the picture, it kind of helps inform the personality. Like whenever you draw something or zoom out and look at the whole thing, and it's like, does it suit the face? I like the face is how I need it, but does the body suit it, and then if not, yeah, you can change it until it fits. So I like to have some stuff on the face done first. And then blocking in, sort of I recommend putting in the shadows where you just know they're going to be, and then letting them leak out from there and sort of pushing it until it feels wrong. Or places where you know it's wrong, and then you just stop. Things like cast shadow and volumetric shadow and all that's important. So just, yeah, putting in the shadows where you know they're going to be. A lot of the time when working with Davor, I do switch the frame to black and just invert it really quickly. It's because Davor was getting, quite dark overall, and when a character's overall dark on a white background, it's hard to be able to tell by contrast a lot of the subtleties and hue shifts and tonal values that are a bit more subtle within the figure. But on a black background, when the figure is the brightest thing, then it can help make sense of it. But by the end, I do ramp up some of the aspects of the curves, which make him more visible, because if I left it to the point where on a white background you couldn't really see what was going on inside the figure, then that would be a bad illustration. But in the process, it was just nice to not worry about that too much. I kind of had the colors and the palette to a place where I felt really comfortable working with, and I felt I can boost things and tweak things overall later on. So I'll just keep working like this. So that's why I work with the black frame on this one a lot of the time. I heard a little anecdote over the Christmas break from my brother that he was watching the quick play version of this with his daughters, and one of them, who is 2, she was really liking this guy until I started drawing those dark lines around his eyes, at which point she lamented that he is now mean, and she didn't like him so much. But she came around again, I think. I thought that was kind of cute. I find that when you have a character with a lot of one type of material, in this case skin, in the other case of Jivian, it was the metal. But when you have a lot of the same material, it can take a lot of futzing around to get everything looking right, and a lot of time rendering. I think it's just because your brain has a lot more real estate to kind of analyze the quality of the material, and you can sort of see the flaws a lot more pronounced if you have more samples of it being rendered. It's sort of hard to explain, but it's a lot easier to get a material or a rendering right on just a tiny piece of something that's different from everything else than it would be to make the whole thing look like one consistent material that's rendered correctly in every in every aspect of its being. So that's why there's a lot of a rendering out of Davor, just trying to get it to the point where I'm fine with it. You can sort of see I just keep pushing things darker and darker, and just darker and darker and darker. The belt at this stage, where it's just a square, just reminds me of this old like Russian military belt that I had. I always equate it's probably from like looking at like Warhammer magazines when I was younger, but just a lot of sort of, I think, a good source for inspiration for orcs is like a Russian and or Mongolian kind of like the steppes and like the plains and all that of Russia, in that part of the world. Just hardy, effective people. I think it's just like a good place to kind of start from. Um, things like fashion choices and material use and just like blunt practicality, just getting things done, whatever works, and just making it work just right. It's sort of like how, like, you see like a lot of Russian stuff, and it's very even like the landscape where it's like it's the landscape there or the objects there, like cars or something, where it looks like you recognize exactly what it is, but it just has a little bit of enough overall where you can tell it's different, but all of it still feels Russian, even if you compared like a car and a can of soda or like a loaf of bread. You could just tell the difference. It's like it's recognizable, but it's just different in some sort of way. And I always feel that like orcs are kind of like more like not like scavenger savage like Tolkien style orcs, but like a culture orcs, or like they're intelligent, they're capable, they're keeping they're keeping they're keeping they're keeping up. Ugh. But they're doing it in just their own way that makes sense to them, and so they'll have all the same stuff, but it's just a little bit different. So yeah, and I don't know. There's just a lot of good like angular or like blunt kind of Russian looking stuff. So I'm often inspired by Russian stuff when it comes to doing orcs. But that's just me. And it's not even all the time. It's usually, it just seems to work a lot of the time. I started off with some sort of straps down the thighs, but I thought that would be sort of weird looking. It kind of just looked like striped, like kind of jailhouse pants. And it also looked too. I was thinking it'd be similar chunks of leather to like what's on his vest, but it looked like the same strips that are on his sandals, and I didn't want it to look like he had, like, if he was putting on his sandals, he had to tie them all the way up his thighs, up to his groin every day, and that would just be annoying. So I just made it into chainmail front of the thigh armor, something that would just at least keep like the major, like the femoral artery from getting slashed open, like that kind of stuff. There's a lot of blood vessels in the leg that you really don't want to get cut, so I thought having that reinforced would be pretty good, especially like on his front. He already has like no armor on his chest. I thought it'd be good to compensate at least somewhere and put some up there. I mean, he is a Davor chain fist. His arms are already taken care of, so his legs should have a little bit of something too. Tried putting a few of them back just to see if it worked, but it looked a little bit too sci-fi, a little bit too desperate, too graphic, too designed. It looked like someone was trying to come up with something clever, and that is not how you do concept art. Well, I mean, a lot of people do concept art that way, but it's just not. It's just not satisfying. You gotta do things that try to do everything consistently with the character, until you'll make more memorable and relatable characters, more immersive games and movies, and more unique characters. Is just trying to let them express themselves, trying to just depict them. It's something that I'll say time and time again. It's just every character is different, even if people say that they're exactly the same as whoever. I can't even think of an examples, but I'm sure everybody's heard of an example of like, John McClane is just, Inspector Gadget. They're the same character. Stuff like that. That's not at all a good example, but you know what I mean. But even when characters are like almost exactly the same, there's still room for like uniqueness and variety because they are still unique. So. It's just as long as you're designing the character, that's how you do it. It's like a good place to start is, would this character put this on every morning? Like, there's been days where I barely want to put on sweatpants. Just waking up and being like, this is I don't want to be awake. This sucks. I'm not doing this. But then I couldn't imagine if you had to wake up and put on a suit of armor every day because that's what I wear because I'm an adventurer. It's like, no way. Like, I want to walk around in pants and fabric, and I don't want to spend half an hour putting on some metal boots and gloves so I can be uncomfortable all day. A character is going to want to wear what they would want to wear, or they should wear what they would want to wear, what they're going to be willing to put on every day. Outside of like extenuating circumstances, like going to war or going on a particular raid. Like if they're actually going to be going into a dungeon or a cave, they're going to be dressed differently, of course. But just somebody on their day to day. This is Davor on a sort of a day to day. I always pictured him while drawing like him sitting at some sort of like camp with like tents and like his horse bridled. I pictured him with the horse. I thought having a horse would be something that he would have being a sergeant, like somebody, he's in charge of a group of guys. He needs to be able to keep them on track. He needs to be able to get around, let other people know what's going on sometimes, like go to higher ups tents and stuff. So I thought a horse would be good, which also, led to him having the cavalier pants with the leather chaps and all that, sort of like the leather inlay sort of thing going on. But yeah, him standing in some like there's like an open fire and it's cloudy, overcast, dreary, kind of like a Chernobyl fall afternoon or early morning, that kind of thing. As far as Davor's history goes, he was born to a really skilled but struggling family of craftsmen in the city of Belshine. He's from the town that he now serves the military of. He had a sister that he was deeply fond of. They were attached at the hip in the center of each other's worlds. When Davor was 11, he was sold into slavery under a 15-year contract in order to get money to pay for the medicine for her sister who was deathly ill. Davor he did it because he loved his sister, and you got to do what you got to do. So he didn't regret it, of course he probably had some. He didn't want to do it, but he gladly did it for her, or he went without complaint in order to help his sister. He was large for an orc. Like even like when he was sold into slavery, like he's always been a big guy. Even like early on, I made a note on this drawing of him being 6'6". That's really huge, especially like huge if you're that tall and muscular as well. Like I know a lot of like really tall people, not a lot of, but probably like 4 or 5 or 6 people that are over 6'5", and it's really tall. But they're all quite thin. But imagine if they're really broad. That's just like a wall of a person. So he's a slave for a while. He's doing slavey stuff. But because of his size, he was quickly bought up by some owners of a pit fighting ring, and he learned quite quickly the skills of that trade. He was an adept fighter. He wields a pair of chains, one that he has around his fist, hence the name Davor Chain Fist. It's sort of like a knuckle duster, kind of bracer, gauntlet sort of approach, and the other one he uses as a whip. I'll get into more detail on those a bit later. He was known for his size, skill, and silence. His grim, stone-faced silence. He was naturally quick, but it was arcane in nature. Like it was like a magical kind of ability that he had. Um, sort of just manipulating, like magically, the space around his body. And a mage had his attention drawn to this and then purchased the remaining years on Davor's contract in order to, free him, but also to train him and trying to teach him to consciously harness his abilities. Davor had particular affinities towards warping and teleportation and item enchantment, but he always focused on concrete skills, using magic only to augment his physical talents. This is one of the reasons why I don't have any like glowing magic stuff floating around him or anything too out there. I do call to the magic stuff a little bit later on when they show up. I'll go into it, but yeah, he's very down to earth, sort of practical guy. So he left the mage's care 15 years after he was sold to slavery. So when his contract was done, he was out of there. Went back home, find his family. They were gone. So lacking the funds to travel around and try to find them, he joined the Belshine military, hoping that traveling around with them, he might find them, or at least information about them. He did quite well in the military. He's valiant. He's been on a lot of campaigns. Highly skilled. Very he's an invaluable asset as far as his range of skills and everything goes. So he's a sergeant. He's known for his quiet and humble nature. The change that he has, he still keeps him around, as is obvious because I drew him with them, as Dylan asked. And yeah, so that's him mostly. He feels no bitterness with regards to his years of servitude. He definitely at least appreciates the really valuable skills that he got through his experience. It's not every day you become an awesome fighter and get trained by a wizard. That'd be pretty nice consolation prize for being a pit fighting slave. But despite his massive monstrous stature, he's generally unassuming. Doesn't say much, but enjoys company. He's a firm believer in getting the job done efficiently as is possible. Prioritizes minimal casualties. So he's not like monster orc. He's definitely a civilized race. He's definitely a civilized member of a civilized race. He's got a sense of he's definitely got a sense of responsibility to the wizard that helped him out. So a portion of what he earns goes back to the wizard who trained him, and so Davor's dressed quite modestly. He doesn't have any real flair, no jewelry, no tattoos, no useless expenditures. What little money he does earn is put to good use. Maybe on muscle milk. So yeah, wears light green or dark gray, light sleeveless leather armor. The chains he's got slightly weathered. He does have them enchanted for greater durability, and later on we'll see that with the bits on his shoulder that I add. I'll talk about those when I start painting them in, because I think they're kind of cool. And the last thing I believe that I add to the piece is a little small wooden pull toy that hangs by his belt that was made by his sister that gave it to him. Dylan didn't specify to me what it was a pull toy of, but he did send me a picture of one of those cute wooden duck ones that I'm sure most people have seen or had, hopefully. But in this case, since it's D&D, I made it a little owl bear. So if you were wondering what it was, if you cared. It's an owl bear, just a little wooden owl bear. So it's actually pretty cool what he does. He's attuned himself to it so he can warp to it from any distance, which is incredibly practical and awesome. And so it'd be nice to keep that in your tent back at home base, and if shit goes real bad, or if everything goes really bad, you can just warp home, which is probably what I would do. Back to your tent. That'd be pretty cool. But also being useful in a fight, like getting the surprise on people. Like you could throw it one way. Like what I would do is if I was sneaking up on some guys, I would just be behind them. Or wait, I'd be near them. Either way, and I'd throw the toy into the bushes somewhere on the other side of them from me, and so then they would go and investigate that. And then when they had their backs turned, I would go attack them. And then if they heard me coming at them, then I would just warp to the toy on the other side of them and then get that second chance at the sneak or the ambush. And that'd be pretty cool. Anyway, so he's a cool character. I was really happy to draw him. As far as the physical descriptions of him, I go over a little bit again. So his nose has just been busted up. I was thinking something like an old hockey player, before the goalies had masks. So one of the tips of his ears is missing. I never asked Dylan why. It's probably a story there. He's got orange eyes, dark yellow skin. He's bald. He seldom grins or laughs. He's not a dour character. He does smile and everything, but I thought in this case it'd be better to go for a bit more intimidating kind of look. He's not savage or brutalistic looking, but he's not really in the mood for tea. His age is starting to show, but he's in peak physical condition. So that's basically all the information I got about Davor Chainfist. I did ask Dylan some extra details about what Bellshine is like, how that's set up, whether they're mercenaries or not, because once you get into military, things can change quite a bit, especially what kind of military. I mean, is it a massive Napoleonic style military where you've got tents and base camps and officers and what are those guys called, the helper guys that would help officers and stuff, and so, or how regimented are they, how formal are they, how upper class are they, evil, are they good, are they neutral, are they something more like Rome, are they something more like the Vikings? There's so many different ways that a military can go, and also it's if you're designing a uniform, it needs to be something that looks like a uniform and not just a weird or cool outfit, if that makes sense. Because if you saw somebody dressed up in a 19th century officer's uniform with all the bright colors and weird aspects to the outfit and petticoat or whatever they have, you would recognize it as military. You would know that they're some sort of fancy, or they would look like a reenactment person, somebody who's into military reenactments. But something like the medieval stuff, their medieval military uniforms weren't often quite so obviously that way, especially when there's a lot of stuff done by mercenaries and sellswords. So what I tried to do with Davor is, his jacket inspired by the military vest, Russian military vest. So kind of like an army surplus thing, trying to fit that in there. Roman military sandals. The pants taken from that like French horse riding officer from 1700s. That I don't think that would make anybody think of military, because even when I saw them, I was like, well, those are really weird. But I thought it works. That would be a good call. But the thing that I think helps out, that comes in later on for Davor, is the button hasp things on the inside of his jacket. You see a lot of them on pretty much every old-timey like jacket or vest or like fancy Napoleon era sort of deal. Okay, so anyway, these shoulder pad things, this is another thing, is sort of, I was thinking of like, they first put them there as like an idea of like the shoulder board, or like the rank, like the some sort of like shoulder ranking sort of thing. But even though they wouldn't be official, but having something on the shoulders would be good, something metallic. And I thought it'd be cool if like if Davor's chains that he had since he was a slave were not only like the chains that used to bind him, but they'd also still have the shackles that used to be around his wrists. So he has the shackle scars around his wrists from these shackles here, but now these work as a means to hold the chains to his vest, which then wrap around his arm. And like, so now they've become like servants of him. He uses them as well, so they're just sort of part of the chains. They're inspired by like some Viking slaver chains that I found in a book in the library. They just had these like weird sort of Lone Ranger shaped links in them, and I thought they're sort of neat looking. They didn't actually go all the way around the neck. I didn't want to fall into the trap of just drawing like the sort of the standard cartoon shackles that we see everywhere. History is just full of different ways to design anything, and you don't even just have to take stuff directly from history or reference. It's not what I'm ever trying to recommend. It's not what I'm trying to do. It's something I'm definitely trying to avoid doing all the time. But the benefit of it is when you see items from the past and all the myriad ways that humans have found solutions to all these problems that you're trying to solve now, it just helps your mind see kind of how they were thinking about this and like what sort of problems they were trying to solve. Like on this Viking one, they don't wrap all the way around. I'd imagine as a means of saving material. It was also easier to make. You don't need to make a hinge to close them. But then it had these chain links that would go across, these longer chain links that would go, and that you could then use to adjust the size for whoever's wrists they were on the inside. And so it was just this like a practical, simpler but still size variable means of shackling someone. They weren't just like the big C-clamp ones that you see in cartoons all the time, or like in like pirate movies. And then there's so many different ways of doing it, but that's kind of the benefit of like history as a source of inspiration and reference, is just helping it break your mind free of what you might just do automatically. So these button hasps that I was talking about earlier, just something to make it a little bit more like Napoleonic kind of officer. So, like, you see these on a lot of like fancy jackets where like they're usually like on jackets with like blue fabric or red fabric, but these are like gold and black. And I wish I knew the technical term for them. It would help a lot right now, but I'm pretty sure you recognize what these sort of things are. But just something for help holding that jacket closed. And then the belt buckle shaped like a bell, stylized bell, dwarven, sort of just pointy and basic, simple. Some fancy gold thread, red thread, and the same red thread attaches the shackles to the top of the vest, the armholes, and also later on the toy owl bear to his belt. So those are the cues that I tried to put into a slightly like a more casual about the rules medieval fantasy military multicultural military with a rank, and that's sort of what I tried to do there. And then for the chains, the thing that I didn't want to do with the chains, I never ever want to just take a chain brush and just paint chain links on. I find that cheapens things. I mean, if you're doing just designs really quick, this is more like almost more like a production art kind of thing. But if I was just doing like a bunch of different designs, I'd probably just use a chain brush. But the number one reason why is because I just wanted the chain to look like it was made out of a bunch of different types of chain, like that he's put together, or like that was put together before him. Like the chains that he was bound to were bound, like they'd been in that slaver's ownership for years or decades, and it's been around, and it's been mended and cobbled together and lengthened and shortened and different chains added together. And you look around and there's a massive variety of different sort of chain links and shapes and sizes for different purposes all over the world. And I thought it'd be much more interesting to have a chain that would be made out of a bunch of different links, just to kind of have that like long-lived more. I mean, not only is it's just more visually interesting, but it also kind of has that story of like, how many times has this chain broken and been repaired with whatever chain was lying around, and like, or maybe they were like in some different port, or they had some chains from when they got slaves from like this place far away, and that kind of that's basically what I was thinking for the chain here. I mean, I definitely like sticking to those sort of long links. I've seen those somewhere before, but I don't remember. I don't know what they're for. I mean, like I've seen a lot of chain. I've looked into chain before, but it would be good to learn more about that stuff. So here's like some thin chain. So it's been doubled up. That kind of stuff. That darker lump is just a weight. That's not actually a chain link. And then for the end of it, I thought it'd be cool so he's got the shackles that bound him, and the chains that used to bind him, and then also this key is the key that locked up the locks that kept him bound as well, but now it's the end of his whip. Maybe something that he might have attacked some slave masters with or something or whatever, but I thought it'd be kind of a fitting bit of extra kit. So he's got the whole setup. It's not just the chains, but it's the whole, all of his old slaver gear. And I also kind of made the end a bit like swastika, like just thinking, slavers being evil is probably something, it's the thing to make it look like it's from a bit of an evil culture. Anyway. Yeah, I thought that was cool. The jingly jangly parts on his knuckles there, just extra sort of weapony parts. You can just flick those in people's eyes, or like even like grab them and use them as pointy blunties, just for jabbing. Don't want to go full swastika. Just rendering out the chain a little bit. Just trying to give it some level of depth or what have you. And I didn't want to overdo the magic stuff, so after adding the shadows and stuff to the chains, I added some magic runes to the shackles. I'll tell you what they say, but I don't want to. So yeah, just subtle and small and little. Nothing too flashy. Davor is never that big into it. He was just too practical. But the chains are enchanted, and so I did feel like I needed to call back to that a little bit. So the last part is the toy, the little wooden owl bear that his sister made. Her sister gave him. It was fun to do. It was just starting off with the 3D block. And then I've been watching a lot of videos by Matthias Wandel on YouTube. He's got this awesome channel where he's just this really clever engineer guy, and he makes a lot of stuff from wood. So I've been watching a lot of bands and table saw and bandsaw and Panther router videos, and it was just when I was drawing this, I was just thinking about the actual process of making it in with real tools in wood. So I built the block, and then I just drew the pattern as if if you had a block of wood and you just draw the shape of the simple toy on the side of the block, and then just punch that out with the saw to the other end, and then just build it up that way. Just render it out. Start with the sort of working backwards the figure. So this time I start with the darker shade and then put on the lights rather than starting with putting in adding the shadows where I know it's going to be. I'm putting the lights where I know that's going to be. I mean, when it comes to stuff like this, you could easily make a really sweet ass little owl bear toy, but you want it to look like something that was made not only in a medieval setting with medieval tools, but by a skilled child, a child from a skilled craftsman family, but a child nonetheless. So it's rudimentary, it's simplistic, it's believable that it could have been built by her. It's not a sweet, cool thing. It's something that was pointed out to me is in Frozen, there's that snowman, Olaf, and say what you will about him, at the very least he doesn't look like something a girl, a young girl in a medieval-ish setting would make. It looks like something that was made in a animation studio, with the lumpy, long, weird face like that. It just doesn't. It's not something that one of those people would make. It's just totally out of place, and so that kind of just ruins. He could have been so much more if it was something that looked like he had been built by those people. And then this thing's been around for around 40 years in war and fight scenes, so I wanted to bash it up quite a bit, but still got all the wheels. For as rough of a life as this toy has been through, it has been cared for. Just put a little hook on the front of it where a string would go for pulling it, and then some more of that fancy red string holding it onto the belt. And then a little bit of shadow to make it look like it's on him. Yeah, I like designing just simple, rudimentary, uncool things like that. It's one thing that I really want to make a video about, where it's you gotta make, when you're designing fantasy stuff, you gotta make it look like the people who or where it's from, or people were actually able to make it, and they did make it at that time and everything. So yeah, this was Davor Chainfist for Dylan. Really fun character to do. I love this sort of character stuff. Definitely looking forward to any sort of other more creaturey characters like this, like orcs and dwarves, and I guess tieflings would count as well, and whatever you got. But don't feel pressured. If you win, I want to draw your favorite character, not you don't feel the need to try to make me draw something that I want. I want to be challenged by drawing stuff that I wouldn't otherwise draw, so keep to the same way to do it. So if you're new to this and you've watched this whole thing, which I doubt, anyway, just follow me on at R&D Fantasy at Twitter, and on Mondays I hold a free character art, role-playing character art lottery. So if you win, then I draw your D&D character. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. Feel free to ask questions and anything, and hope it helped.